Guys, gals, and pals, welcome back to Paint&Talk episode 12. As always, I hope you had a good 24 hours since the last time I've seen you. I realized, that I said I've hoped you had the best 24 hours 2 days in a row. So that's a serious streak. I don't want things to go right down, but listen, it's not going to get better. I hope you had a solid 24 hours either way. Myself, I've had a pretty great 24 hours, which is why I think I'm coming in hoping that yours was a little worse. No, joke aside though, I had a good night last night after I finished recording and all that. Pretty annoyed at myself with how I've been recording, the recording times, because here's an example, right? So today I was ready to record 2 hours ago. It was all set up, and then I just fell asleep. It's really bad. I think it's just because of the way I schedule my days and stuff and all that boring stuff, you know what I mean? It's nothing interesting. I don't really want to bore you with the details, but I keep just falling asleep. I can't get in here and record without a solid nap on the floor beforehand. And it's just the struggles of being, a painter and talker at the same time. But last night after I recorded, I did get to go see the new Bob Dylan movie with Timothée Chalamet, which is a million years old at this point. I know I'm probably the last guy to see it. There were really 3 people in the theater that me and my friends were in, but it was a really good movie. I know it came out all the way back Christmas Day, I want to say. Timothée Chalamet is on a serious Christmas Day streak. I feel like no one else is talking about this, but last year, I went to see Wonka right after Christmas. Phenomenal movie. This year, we have the Bob Dylan movie, and I think I saw, is it Marty Supreme? One of his movies that's coming out next year, on Christmas Day. Either way, he's pulling numbers every Christmas. He is Santa. So, what can I say? Go Timothée Chalamet. Go Christmas and shout out Santa. But it was a really great movie. I was a little worried going into it that because Timothée Chalamet is such a famous actor at this point that sometimes when someone like that's depicting another famous person, it's okay, this is just Timothée Chalamet who's trying to impersonate Bob Dylan. They can't really disappear into the character, but he did a great job. I gotta say, he did a really great job, and it was overall a great movie. It was one of those movies that makes me want to start acting just nonchalant and quiet forever, and then I try it for a week and it's just not me, so I just don't do it anymore. But really just it makes Bob Dylan look so cool. I really didn't know too much about Bob Dylan before that. I've listened to some of his music, and I knew a little bit of the political stuff surrounding him with the Freedom March. I think that's what that was called, the march on I think it was the Freedom March, right? With MLK, the I Have a Dream speech. I knew he was there from the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta and stuff, but overall, it was a really, really good movie. Highly recommend. Today, I want to come here, though, and talk about, kind of finish up a discussion from yesterday halfway, but it's also its own topic for sure. I want to talk about complete vibes, which is I hate that word, vibes. I think it's so, 2016, you know what I mean? Who's saying that these days? But a complete vibe's the best way I can put it. Or maybe, a well-rounded aesthetic, whatever you want to say. But I think we all know what I mean when I say complete vibe, I think a lot of my favorite stuff is very complete in that regard, To give kind of more insight into what I mean, because I think this is the type of thing that can very easily become, a misconstrued kind of idea. I think it's important for everyone, but especially someone if you're interested in making stuff in general, whether that's, painting, music, whatever it may be. I think it's really cool and a nice exercise to try and be more self-aware about why you like what you like. So whenever you find yourself really attracted to an art piece, or a building, or even a person or a place, or an activity, I think it's a really good exercise for everyone, but especially people who want to be creative, to really sit for a second and be why do I like this thing? Like, what is it about this that's drawing me in this way? And for me, as of late, what I've discovered is that it's a complete vibe is what I really like. That's what I really go for. And what do I mean by that? For an example, I think a big example of it was, have you ever been camping in a cabin? If you have, you know that every cabin has this certain smell, right? And a little while ago, me and my friend, we were grabbing pizza, and we were talking about it, and he was like, we were talking about cabins, and just like going camping, and saw that, and he was like, I hate the smell of cabins, and I was like, I love the smell of cabins, and I was like, because it doesn't feel like a cabin without that smell, you know? And I think that's a great example of like, you need that smell to complete this feeling of being in a cabin. For me, you know, as someone who's, every cabin I've been in smells like that, I now have that association that makes me drawn towards this thing that, like, maybe just does smell bad. I mean, it does, but, like, it's a smell that I like because of that. And I think that's a great example of, like, how that can be done, you know? Like, what I mean by a complete vibe is, like, when something's truly completed, and, like, through and through it is that thing. I think there's also a lot more, like, literal examples that we all probably have associations with that I, quite frankly, should have started with first. You know, like, for an example, if you were to go into said wood cabin and there was an Xbox sitting in the middle with a new flat screen TV, that would have a very different, you know, that would be a little more conflicting with the nice wood cabin that's, like, oil heated and stuff than it would be if there was maybe an old TV from the 80s with a bunch of VHS tapes, something like that, you know? We have these associations that create a complete feeling. And I think the place where I really started to, like, discover, like, oh, that's what I go for, is in music. Because I was trying to go through my favorite albums a little while back. You know, Igor by Tyler, the Creator, is one of them. I love that album. Pinkerton by Weezer is one of them. Really big fan of a lot of the early Green Day stuff, Insomniac especially. Let me think. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is one of my favorite albums. And I was looking through all these albums, like, they're very different. I mean, you know, you could throw some of them into the same genre of, like, Green Day and Weezer, or the same, you know, kind of pop rock, little angsty genre. But, you know, when you get down to it, I feel like that's a lot of, also, it's new, but Brat was one of my favorite albums. I think it's personally going to end up being one of my favorite albums for a long time. It's a little new still, so I don't want to say that, like, 100%, you know what I mean? It came out 2024, so I don't want to, like, maybe by 2026 I won't be listening. I think I will, though. And, you know, when looking at all these albums, I was like, what is the thing that makes these, like, good to me? And I think what I liked about it is through and through they're a complete vibe, you know what I mean? Like, there is not one song on Igor that doesn't belong on Igor. If you took, you know, I want to say I Think is the second track off Igor, and threw that onto the middle of Call Me If You Get Lost, or Tyler's newest album, 100% the second you get to that track, you're like, this is an Igor song. Like, this just is, you know, like, it fully looks like the cover from Through and Through. Blonde by Frank Ocean's another great example of that. And even, oh my god, I feel like it's so underrated are the aesthetics around Blonde. Like, he also released this magazine with it, and there were a bunch of photo shoots that came out. And just, like, because you look at the album cover and you look at the music, you're like, oh, nice, this fits. But the more you dive into it, like, he really had a vision for that album. I think that's one of the best albums of all time, if not the best, to be honest. It's so good. Comment below your favorite albums. I'm very interested in hearing that. I'm super into this stuff, but, you know, these things, they're very much complete. I think that's the best way of putting it. If you were, and it can go the other way too, so back to Igor by Tyler, the Creator. If you're listening to Igor and randomly, you know, let's think of a song, off, you know, track 2, off of Chromacopia, Ratata, right? That song, if you put that onto Igor, the second you would get to it, you'd be like, whoa, this is, like, very much a whole different, like, this doesn't feel right compared to the last one. And I think that's really good, when you can set up that. And full disclosure, sometimes, like, it's okay to not go for that, you know what I mean? I think, staying on Tyler, like, I think his newest album's a really great example of that, where, like, I would say, for an example, Sticky, which transitions into I want to say Take Your Mask Off. Like, those two songs are very different, but because of the way the album's set up and like kind of like how it feels, it still works. Like, that can work too. For me personally though, I love and look for things that are super, you know, X to Y to Z. They're very uniform. They're very through and through one thing. And obviously when we look at music, you know, it's a pretty direct example, I'm sure, and I'd love to hear in the comments if you know some. You can think of music where like this album through and through is a very complete idea, a complete vibe, right? I hate the amount of time I'm saying complete vibe today. It's really one of the worst things to ever come out of Paint&Talk, but I don't know anywhere else, any other way to, you know, it's a uniform work, like that's so, you know, it's a complete vibe. So I'd love to hear them. By the way, I do fully intend on replying to comments soon. Maybe by the time you're seeing this, I've replied to a bunch of them. I've just been like, it's hard to get into like doing this daily, because it does take a lot of time. It takes me like 3 hours to record, because I nap for an hour beforehand, and then it takes me at least like 2 hours to edit them. Like, so I'm kind of focusing on getting that there first. I will be responding soon. So comment your favorite albums. Definitely, I'll be in there. I feel bad about that. I feel really bad because I love when people take the time to comment. It means a lot, but I want to get the videos out first because I feel like it's kind of why you're here. Otherwise, you just DM me. But anyways, back on track. Back to the albums, right? I think it's pretty easy with an album or a movie to recognize like when something is a very complete uniform work, a complete vibe. Movies, I feel like it's even easier because of directors have such strong cinematography styles. You know, if you were to take Grand Budapest Hotel and throw in a scene from Fantastic Mr. Fox, it would feel weird, but like still you could tell it's in the same universe. Now, if you took Grand Budapest Hotel and threw in a scene from Avengers Infinity War, you would be like, this is weird. Even if the same characters were there, even if it was the same thing, you'd be like, this is strange. Something's not right here. And to me, that's a sign of like great work. Obviously, using the Marvel movies as an example is a little bit, it's a slippery slope almost, because I think those movies, well, they do have a style that's coherent. Their style is very much, it's kind of like salt and pepper, you know what I mean? You wouldn't say a chef's signature salt and pepper, that's kind of the baseline. Whereas Wes Anderson, his is more like what's the sauce you put on to a steak? That thing. He's what, you know, like certain levels of style definitely exist. So even that, I feel weird saying that. I don't want to go too deep down that, because I feel like that's not really true. But anyways, you know, in art, it's easy, is the point. If in the middle of the Mona Lisa, Picasso did half of it, you would know, right? And that's where, in art, it's like, that's what makes art so cool to me, is when it's complete like that. But I think it's more interesting, too, when you take it outside of art, right? When you look at architecture as a complete vibe, right? That tells you kind of a lot, doesn't it? And that's where I think, like our associations and the way in which we is interact, the word that I'm looking for, maybe. The way that we handle things is very much, you know, of what we associate with the things and what we consider to be a complete vibe, which I can't get over, that word. They can tell us things. So I think a big example of it is like universal symbols, right? The sun is always going to be associated with joy, whereas blue, which I'm painting with, is always going to be associated with sadness. And that's interesting. Like, where does that come from? What does that tell us? And that's where I find things like, that's where I think art is so interesting, because it has a capability like nothing else to tell us about ourselves. Because if I were to, you know, show you a bunch of, let's think of an example here. If I were to show you like a bunch of things and go like, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? You could go, like, let's say I'm showing you a bunch of commercials and I'm like, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? You're going, no, because you will judge it based on, do I want to buy the product, X, Y, Z. Art has this certain like inexplicable quality almost, that your only response a lot of the time is just like, It's very intuitive. And I think since it's intuitive, since it's inexplicable, it can tell us almost like the things we're incapable of saying. And this is why I love the work of like Colin Ward, because I think from a perspective of political science, he, as much as I wouldn't say I'm, a fanatic who really agrees with everything he's ever said, I think he gets one thing very right, and that's that art is capable of telling us so much more than we would ever think it is about our societies, about like how we're organized. I definitely think that discussing this in the middle of a paint and talk is kind of biting off more than I can chew. Now that like I'm in the middle of it, or I guess now we're probably in the upper leg of the episode, but I think it is like, this definitely is something that could be a full video that I flesh out, but it's honestly something that's even hard to flesh out with proper time, because like, for me to go, you walk into a room and you notice the TV's out of place when there's technically nothing wrong. Like, there's nothing objectively strange about a TV being in the corner of the room with an Xbox under it in an old-fashioned Victorian-style home. But the second you walk in there, it's like, oh, this would be so much nicer looking if a decadent table was there. And now the obvious answer is to say like, okay, well, duh, the Xbox new, the old decadent home old, right? Easy. But I feel like there's more there than just new and old, because we recognize, for an example, yes, one is new, one is old. That's definitely an element of it. But past that, like, could you tell me the year of both those things? And if you can't tell me the year, why do you know which one's new and which one's old? What are the associations here of all these things? And, maybe the years aren't a great example, just because, like, even if you can't tell me the year, you could probably still you can pinpoint that one's from 1700s, one's from 2020. So I guess that's a bit of an extreme example, but like, I feel like there's almost something in there about class, maybe, like in the fact that we notice these things. Maybe it's even as simple as there's something about routine in there, and that's where I think these things are so just good. I think also, like, I think there's almost like a power to it in art, taking a little less from the society stuff, because I honestly don't think I don't think I'm smart enough to talk about that. I think, or maybe I should just read a little more Colin Ward before I try and bite that one off. But taking it back to art, I would say I think there's like an intrinsic sort of like sensibility we have towards things of these associations, where like we can a lot of things that we consider to be good, when we're like, I just like that, is because it really dives into that complete idea. Something I've been thinking about a lot that I think is going to end up becoming a main channel video is like, what makes a good song? And not from like a perspective of, music theory or like a very scientific perspective, because yeah, you could crunch all the top 100 hits ever, put them into a thing and be like, a good song is technically with these 4 chords in this tempo, sung by a woman and deals with this subject matter. Like, you could do that, or I asked my friend who's a musician, I asked her, like, what do you think makes a good song? And she had a lot of similar things to say, not quite as like numbers focused, but more so just like, structure, tempo, these things. And I think that's interesting. I think that's very good to know, but like, I'm more interested in from like a philosophical kind of just like dig into that question. What do you think personally makes a good song? The things that we can't really quantify in art, because that's what I'm most interested in always. And going along thinking through this as of now, and the video's not coming out for a while, so I guess I could just say what I think so far. Maybe it'll help me write it too. Like, I have 2 things that I mainly think. I think one of them is like a little bit more definitive. I think good songs are universal, right? So I think good songs oftentimes have some sort of subject matter that we can all relate to. And even going into like the biggest songs of last year, right? Like Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter. As much as like maybe you can't relate to the feeling of someone staying up all night thinking about you, you can relate to the feeling of like wanting somebody to do that. Like, they appeal to some universal human thing, or being like like feeling yourself, kind of, you know what I mean? Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan's another great example, where like maybe you haven't known somebody who was outwardly rejecting their queerness, but you've known somebody who you've watched not be themselves and you kind of felt a certain way, or maybe you haven't been yourself sometimes and you felt a certain way about that, you know? So like these things will not on the surface always do have some sort of universality to it. Like Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar, obviously a huge percentage of the people listening to that can't relate to it. If you want to take it in its most literal sense, they don't know Drake. And if you want to take it in more of like its cultural sense, a lot of the people wouldn't be able to relate to it because they're not from Kendrick's background where they could like say that, you know what I mean? But you can all kind of relate to the idea of like having an outsider that you don't like as much because of something where they don't have the same experience as you. Like that's a very like just natural thing to feel, I feel like. At one point or another, you know, we all kind of come into these circumstances, and I think great art, but great songs too, appeal to that for sure. So that's one of them. That's one that I'm fairly confident in. But the other one, tying back to our main conversation here, is that I think they're potent, you know? And this is something where I really need to look at more songs and kind of judge them. But I have a hard time finding a good song that has one foot in one thing, one foot in another. And usually I feel like when they do have one foot in one thing, one foot in another, you know, perhaps let's say they're crossing genres, something like that. I think oftentimes it ends up being done so well that they almost create something new out of that. You know, I can't find many good songs where it's like it doesn't know what it wants to be. So I don't know exactly what I would call that. You know, maybe decisive. A good song is decisive, but I think decisively potent maybe might be the better way to put that. You know, and it kind of ties it back to the idea of like they are a complete feeling. If there was a single drum on Good Luck Babe that shared a feature of Not Like Us, you would notice it. And I think that is indicative of it being really good. That's a very underdeveloped thing. Like, I gotta think about that a lot more, because I just don't think, like, I feel like I'm missing something, or I feel like maybe it's too much of a non-point, almost. Because what is that? That's the trouble there, is like, to be universal, you can kind of go very straight and narrow of like what that means. What does it mean to be universal? We can all relate to it, universal human experience. Like, you can draw that back to a lot of things. Who decides what potent is, though, you know? Who decides when something is potently punk versus potently rap, right? And I know like in certain like genres, there will be certain gatekeepers of like once this artist says it's good, or once this like festival really takes it in. That was something that was big in the Bob Dylan movie, is like folk. The guys running the Newport Folk Festival got to kind of decide what folk music was and wasn't. And, you know, but then even then, I would argue, after seeing the movie, I don't know the most about Bob Dylan, so someone could correct me on this if I'm wrong, it seems like Bob Dylan changed the face of folk by the end of the movie, and then went on to kind of switch genres into more of a rock focus. So that, can the gatekeepers really say anything? If we're saying the gatekeepers are the ones who have to decide what's the most potent, and they really can't affect things more than the artists, then that would make that point just incorrect. So that's probably my biggest struggle there, is like, there's so many questions of what that means. And I think I do just want to search more of like, the trouble with a concept like this, which is why I'm taking longer to do it. I've had this idea for a little while now. It was actually inspired by a Chappell Roan interview with Nardwuar, where she asked him, she was like, what do you think makes a good song? You know, is it a good lyrics, good hook, a good melody kind of thing, right? And, they gotta flip this over. I was like, that's an interesting question. I wouldn't discuss it quite from there. I think she was more asking the question from like a perspective of she's a musician. So she has more of a right to ask that question. For me, I think it's more of just like, in what I like, what's a good song? But the trouble with it always is like, a good song is so different to a bunch of people. You know, I would say Not Like Us is a good song by Kendrick, the big one from the diss track last year. I think a ton of people though would be like, no, I hated that song. I thought it was bad, you know? And that's the trouble with art being subjective, is like, and then someone, you can always find an exception to the rule by having somebody say like, I think like, I think this is a good song, and it's about an ant climbing onto an ant hill. And no one can relate to that no matter what. No one ever can relate to it, but I think it's a good song still. Like, you can always find red herrings like that. Which is always the double-edged sword of talking about art to me. You know, because on the one hand, that's why I love it, because you can just, for lack of a better term, make shit up. You know, you can really dive deep into, like, how do you feel about this, and that matters a lot more than any sort of, like, genuine integrity in your point. You know, it's a lot more feelings-based, which I think is more fun to debate. I guess it's almost like the fun of being a chemist in ancient Greece versus right now. Like, in ancient Greece, all these guys were sitting around just like, I think the world's just like fire, water, ice. I think it was Empedocles who was like, I think it's just fire, water, earth, and air, like the 4 elements. And then like he had no proof of that. He was just like, just look around, it is. And that's what I think is the most fun, is to be like, I think this because I think X, Y, Z. And, you know, you can kind of come up with an argument and try and convince people. That's always been the most fun thing to me. That's why I love discussing art. But the double-edged sword is like, someone can just as easily go like, nope. And then we're like, all right, like, you're like, what you say is just as valid as me. So like, it's like, there's no, it's almost too subjective sometimes. But I'd much rather that than it not be subjective enough. So, you know, I guess I'm complaining too much, but either way, you know, getting back on track for the last time, I just think it's a really interesting question about like, what makes, we all kind of have an idea of like what makes up this like complete vibe, right? Of like anything. But it's also so like, why do we know that? Like, why is the TV from the 80s more fitting in the log cabin than the TV from right now, you know? And, you know, you'd go, the log cabin was built in the 80s, but it's like people are living in it right now, though. So why does one fit so much better to us? And I think there's something really interesting in there. And, you know, maybe this is a case of like, because obviously I've done a half-adequate job at explaining what I think it tells us. And I think that the honest answer is, I don't think, I know the honest answer is like, I don't know. But I will, you know, on a somewhat optimistic note, say maybe once I figure out the answer to that, it'll really start helping me with my own work. Because I know I want to go for a complete vibe, but why? Like, what does that tell us? That's always my concern too, though. I'm just getting stuff off my chest today, I guess. My concern is always that, like, maybe I'm overthinking some of this stuff. Because I feel like a lot of the people I look up to, who are creative, they kind of just, like, they just go, you know what I mean? They don't really worry about, like, what does that mean? But, you know, I guess I do that with everything, though, too, to be honest. It's always just been the way I am. So I guess just different types of people making different types of things. This is gearing up to be kind of an interesting painting. Not quite. So my big thing with these paints that I think I'm discovering, like, to be my repeated problem, and I don't want to search up just painting courses too. I think I've mentioned this before. I want to try and figure out it right in front of you guys, because, like, if I go off on here and search up, like, how to blend perfectly with oil paints, and then I come back doing it the next day, I think it's a little antithetical to what I'm trying to do. So I don't want to do that. I might for something like this, though, because the big struggle is, like, you know, the colors just blend together so much because it's all wet. I'm doing it all so fast. You know, these are all 30-minute paintings. And I want to keep them that way. I think that's cool. I don't like the idea of me going off and painting like the other half of this off camera. I'm sure it'll happen eventually, just because I'm sure one day, you know, I'll really not have the time to finish something I want to do on camera. But, you know, I really want to keep it like that. So it makes it so there's kind of a lot of mixing going on. But at the same time, I like that, you know? I think being a little bit shitty in the middle of something that otherwise is good can sometimes lead to a really good product, or a very unique product, because, you know, it tells a story. This could very easily be the story of just, like, another painting, but I feel like instead it can kind of become the story of something that was done very fast, done in 30 minutes. And that's the medium I'm going for, you know? I'm not just trying to make paintings, I'm trying to make paintings that I I'm trying to make paintings on Paint and Talk. You know, it's a different thing. So I guess you know, once again, a double-edged sword. But I don't dislike it. I actually do think this is pretty cool. I want to just go for a swath. I want to try and paint kind of an emotion, and I think, not to toot my own horn too much, but I think I did it. I think I actually did do it. So yeah, as always, you guys know the drill. Go check out this painting on Instagram. There's paint all over my hands, which is surprisingly the first time that's really happened, I think, in one of these. There's paint on my hands. So go check this out on Instagram. Not bad. It'll be straight on, no filters, little explanation of what I was going for in the description. And until tomorrow, comment your favorite albums below, actually. Just no joke this time, just actually comment your favorite albums. I really want to hear them. And why. Like, I'd love to hear some of your favorite albums, and also albums that you think are complete vibes, or like very much doing a uniform thing, if it makes any sense by the end of this. Or there could just be a bunch of comments going like, Dice, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you sound crazy. Like, we don't